that I have filed, and it does not ban state and local governments from actually going out on the market and purchasing whatever equipment they can find out there on the market, including that kind which is distributed under the 1033 program. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so we're not about banning by this legislation law enforcement agencies from having this equipment. But it is true that local and state law enforcement agencies and even federal law enforcement agencies can acquire this equipment, surplus equipment, directly from the Department of Defense without having any civilian governing authority input into the process. Isn't that correct?
That is not correct. The state coordinator of the state, the governor appointed a civilian authority state coordinator, is the person who makes those decisions.
All right, well, let's look at it like this then. A state agency official then put in charge of this program by a governor can decide that it's okay for a local government law enforcement agency to acquire this equipment directly from the Department of Defense, correct?
They put in their request through that state coordinator.
And they don't put in their request. And that state coordinator has no legal requirement to confer with any state or local official about that law enforcement agency request, correct?
He's appointed by the governor, and that's his mission.
Well, but he does not work for a county or a city government, correct?
That's correct.
So that state authority can make a decision for a local municipality or county government without any input from that local government authority, correct?
Well, the local government authority, the police authority of that local government is requesting the equipment.
Let's take the Ferguson Police Department, for example. The Ferguson Police Department would be able to fill out the paperwork and send it in and request a piece of equipment, let's say an armored vehicle, an MRAP, from the Department of Defense that's been declared surplus property. Isn't that theoretically a possibility?
That's correct.
And they could do it without the input from the local governing authority there in Ferguson, correct?
Yes, I guess.
So you're bypassing your local
Congressman,
governing authority.
From the Department of Defense's perspective, we are making excess equipment, taxpayer procured equipment available.
That.
How the states want to manage that, I understand.
I'm looking at the process.
But how the states want to manage that process is up to the states, not to the Department of Defense.
Well, it's actually a federal government program that allows the state and local law enforcement agencies to acquire this military-grade weaponry without any input from the civilian governing authority.
Okay.
And that's the point that I'm making. And I think that that is that is not good when the citizens, through their local governing authorities, have not made a decision about whether or not they want this kind of equipment on their streets. Now, with respect to the qualifications of a state coordinator, the federal government has no qualifications that it insists that these coordinators have. Is that correct?
The states appoint those coordinators.
And so there is no requirement that that individual, that state coordinator, be a law enforcement agency, be a law enforcement officer.
Mr. Johnson, I'm not sure. I can't speak for all.
So it can a state. Do you know the qualifications of the Georgia coordinator that you named earlier?
I believe Mr. Sherrod has experience in law enforcement.
But it's not true that he has to have experience in law enforcement in order to be in that coordinator's position, correct?
No, sir, that is not a requirement by the government.
So anybody could be appointed, and they can just be a rubber stamp and run the requests through without paying any attention to it whatsoever, just signing their name.
Sir, that could be, but that is
All
not
right.
my experience with how.
And then that kind of setup could yield to the local law enforcement agency a fully automatic weapon that you would assume that they would turn it into a semi-automatic weapon before they would place it in use. But there's no guarantee or requirement that the local law enforcement agency do so. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Sir, absolutely, you know, execution of the program is left to the state coordinators. And in my experience, they're good public servants. They take their duties very seriously, and they run a pretty tight ship.
Well, I tell you, in my state,
Gentleman's time has
Georgia.
expired. Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.